Example 1. Find in ascending powers of x the first 4 terms in the expansion of 1 plus 3x raised to the power of 6 and 1 minus 4x raised to the power of 5. So let's get started and let's see how are we going to do this. Now, for some of you who may not be familiar still with the binomial expansion, I encourage you to open up a textbook and turn to the page whereby you can see the formula, okay, so that you can follow better. So in this case, very simple, right? This is our a, so 1 is the first term, 3x is the second term. So like we mentioned earlier on, the first term will take the full power, and therefore is 1 to the power of 6, isn't it? Okay, and of course the next thing will be 6c1. Okay, and of course 1 will reduce power by 1, so now 1 will be raised to the power of 5, and of course 3x now will gain 1 power. Okay, and of course this is second term, and this is the third term. Okay, the third term will be 1 raised to the power of 4 and 3x raised to the power of 2, and of course the last one, okay, and 6c3, alright, which have 1 raised to the power of 3 and 3x raised to the power of 3. Okay, and we have we actually have some more terms behind. Okay, is the only thing is that we are not really concerned, because we're only concerned with the first 4 terms, right? As you may have noticed already, if the power is 5, when fully expanded there should be 7 terms. Okay, so we're not going to do all 7 terms, we only want the first 4. Right, so what left to do next is of course to simplify whatever that we have here, we have expanded here. Okay, so 1 to the power of 6 is obviously 1, because 1 multiplied by 1 multiplied by 1 multiplied by 1, you always get 1 no matter what is the power, isn't it? So from a calculator, alright, 6c1 is 6, so 6 multiplied by 3, and that'll give us an 18x. Okay, of course again 1 to the power of 5 is 1, right? So I hope sooner or later you will start to realize that 6c1 is 6, 7c1 is 7, 8c1 is 8, and so on and so forth, right? 1 million c1 is also 1 million. Okay, so actually the first 2 terms are actually very easy to work out. Okay, so for the third term, now 6c2, right, you really have to use a calculator on this, because you know, it may not be so easy for you to calculate this mentally. So from the calculator, 6c2 is a 15 multiplied by 3 square, which is 9, right? So 15 multiplied by 9, and that will give us 135. So this will be 135 x square. Okay, again the 1 is as good as not being there at all, right? So let us proceed on to the next term, 6c3. Alright, so from your calculator, 6c3 is 20. So 20, and of course 3 cubed is 27, so 27 multiplied by 20, that will give us 540 x cubed. Alright, of course you have a dot behind to represent that there are actually more terms behind. Alright, so this is our expansion. Okay, we have already answered the first part of the question, the first 4 terms. Alright, next let us move on to the next part, the second part. Alright, to expand 1 minus 4x raised to the power of 5. Okay, so again, now this will be our first term, this will be our second term. Okay, now take note of the negative, alright, because now our second term is negative 4x. Okay, including the negative. Alright, so this is the second time we're doing the expansion, so I hope I can do a little bit faster. So the first term, which is 1 raised to the power of 5, because 1 we have a full power, isn't it? So 1 raised to the power of 5 is 1. Okay, then of course plus, and 5c1, isn't it? So 5c1, as we mentioned earlier on, 5c1 should be 5. Okay, and of course 1 will have now power, of course 1 to the power of 4, isn't it? Okay, but what I hope is that of course you must know that 1 to the power of 4 is 1, and therefore it doesn't really make a difference whether we write the 1 to the power of 4 here or not. Alright, so we can just leave it blank to simplify things a little, so we can do actually faster. So the second term now, alright, which is our minus 4x, okay, will be raised to the power of 1. So you know, this is what we have. Okay, next term of course now is a 5c2. Okay, again the 1 we can simply ignore, and it will be just negative 4x raised to the power of 2. And of course the fourth term, which is 5c3. Okay, and now this second term will be raised to the power of 3, and of course plus dot dot dot, because we know that we have actually 2 more. Okay, 2 more terms at the back, but we don't have to care because we only want the first 4 terms, right? So let us now just simplify this. All right, of course we have to do it with the help of a calculator. So 5 multiplied by negative 4, all right, that will give us a negative 20, negative 20x. Okay, so next, right, we'll use our calculator to calculate 5c2. So from the calculator, 5c2 should give you 10, right? So 10, here we have a negative 4 square, and that will give us a positive 16. So 16 multiplied by 10, of course everybody knows what's that. Alright, so there will be 160 x squared. Alright, so lastly, from our calculator again, 5c3 is also 10, and 4 to the power of 3 is 64. Alright, but because it's negative, so negative 4 raised to the power of 3 is negative 64, so that will give us a negative 64 multiplied by 10, and that will give us 640 x cubed. Okay, so again, this is our answer for the second part. Okay, we basically have answer the first and the second part. Alright, so this is basically how you do your binomial expansion. Alright, do try to expand a couple on your own. Alright, just try some questions on your own to see if you can get the answer. This is very, very important that you are able to do this this first step of your binomial expansion. Alright, how to expand it. Right, next we move on to hence. Find the coefficient of x cubed in the expansion of this. Hey, wait a minute. Isn't this expansion what we just did in part 1, and this expansion what we just did in part 2? Alright, so what we're going to do now is simply take this expansion multiplied by this expansion. Now what is it trying to say? It's simply to say that, well, because we know that this expansion is as good as writing this sum of polynomials, and this expansion is as good as writing this sum, right? So when we're going to multiply this expansion to this expansion, we're simply going to multiply this to this. Okay, so let us just do it now, because it's a hence part. Alright, hence simply means you have to use the above result. You have to use the answers that we have gotten earlier on. So in this case, it simply means that the answer that we got earlier on is our expansion itself. Right, so let us just copy it down very, very quickly. Alright, now we can forget about the dot 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 behind, because now we're interested in is only in the x cubed term. Right, so when we have this expansion multiplied with this expansion, what it means is that, well, this entire expansion multiplied with this entire expansion. Now, but what we are interested in is not the entire product. We are only interested in the term with x cubed. Alright, now how are we going to get x cubed out of here? Well, this is how. Okay, now take a look at this. Right, this 1, when multiplied by this x cubed, will give us an x cubed. When this x multiplied by this x square will give us an x cubed as well. And this x square, 135x squared multiplied by x will give us an x cubed. And of course this 540x cubed multiplied by this 1 will give us another x cubed. So as you can see, we have a couple of x cubes around. Okay, now are we missing out any? And how do we know there are only these x cubes, right? So this is when you have to really understand what's going on. Alright, now take a look at this expansion that we have earlier on, right? Now it is in ascending power of x, which simply means that the power of x will keep increasing. It makes sense anyway, isn't it? Because you realize that the 3x is the second term, and as the term goes on, the 3x will just gain in power. Okay, gains the power, gets higher and higher. So the next term of course will be x to the power of 4. Alright, likewise for this, the next term will be x to the power of 4 term. Alright, so of course we're not interested in x to the power of 4. Right, and therefore we only stop at x to the power 3, and yeah, we can be quite certain that that's all the x cubed that we'll have. Alright, so let us just work it out now. So 1 multiplied by negative 640 will give us a negative 640 x cubed. Alright, and of course we have 18 multiplied by 160, which will give us a positive 2880 x cubed. Okay, next we have 135 multiplied by negative 20, which will give us a negative 2700 x cubed. Right, lastly we have our 540 multiplied by 1, which will give us a positive 540 x cubed. Okay, so when we sum it up, we will have 80 x cubed. Okay, so in this expansion there's only one x cubed term, and the x cubed term is an 80x cubed. So the coefficient, bear in mind, the question asks us to find the coefficient. So please do not write your answer as 80x cubed. Okay, so the answer should be simply 80. Okay, so this is the answer for this example.